Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Pensado's Place. We got a great conversation with Dave Godowsky from Native Instrument. He's head of artist relations, and one of his biggest artists is Alicia Keys, and we are going to make her new plugin, Alicia's Electric Keys. We're going to make that available to you. In fact, for the next 4 weeks, it will be 3 giveaways per week. It's an amazing plugin. It's got the sounds of her personal electric grand piano. The way she and her partner Ann do things, they are recorded with excruciating detail with a really powerful sound design engine. And she's got her own custom-made effect chains in that. It's the you won't be Alicia Keys, but it's the closest you can get. So how do you do that? You go to pensadosplace.tv/ Alicia Electric Keys, Alicia's Electric Keys. You'll see the link below us, and come join us and win. Our conversation with Dave is something that you should listen to, I think, because we're in this real time of change, and we call it the culture of creativity is changing, and we addressed it a bit. So without further ado, here's Dave Godowsky. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
We were just recently talking before the cameras went on about how we're such a thin line in terms of being connected. And when that line gets disconnected, you were talking about, a blizzard, and I got friends, you're on the East Coast, friends on the East Coast that are under 100-degree heat, and if things start to not work or your internet goes out, and first you think it's cool, and all of a sudden you worry, wait, I'm out of touch with people. Can I get food? And can I get...
Yeah.
And it's part of this ethos where we are in an environment where if we don't hold the line, who does?
Right. And I was thinking about it because we had this blizzard. It was a late blizzard. I live in Maine. We had a blizzard in March that left hundreds of thousands of people without power for days. And yeah, it's kind of fun for a while, but then suddenly, your phone battery runs out and there's no computer, there's no internet. For a lot of people, there's no water or heat, or suddenly the walls of your house and the roof are really all you have.
Yeah.
And you realize that everything about modern society and modern life is actually we're just barely holding on to it. And you can revert back to like hundreds of years ago in like less than 24 hours.
And I think that's an important consideration, even as a creative person. I think the idea of being just so roots-based, bottom line, because no matter what tools, you guys have amazing tools, and we meet people who have amazing tools. But if they don't touch you, if you don't feel it in your gut, if you don't have a passion for it, they're missing something. You
right.
Agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the most, and some people might think this is all tangential conversation, but it's not. And that's the important point is I think, this is all leading somewhere. It's actually at the center of it, anyone listening to this is someone who makes music. And I assume if you're involved with making music, what you're chasing after is that thing, that great thing, the reason you got into music in the first place, that moment where a song, any kind of music just affects you and touches you in a way that nothing else in the world does.
Yeah.
And so then you get that, desire to create that.
Yes.
And so the question is like, well, what's that? What's that all about? And that's the thing that's deeper rooted than just looking on what's on the outside of a song or looking at the production tools and technology.
And I think also getting comfortable with the fact that you may not get to that. That is the glory of this thing.
Yeah.
You're going to search and you're going to put your own interpretation on something, and you're going to learn from other things you listen. You're going to surprise yourself and go, I didn't know that would affect me that way.
Herb, we had talked about this before of we spoke a couple months ago, just after my grandmother's
Yep.
funeral. She was
Yep.
101 years old. And
Yep.
when I went to her funeral, I was thinking to myself, like, when she was born, the majority of houses in America didn't have electricity.
Wow.
And like, this isn't some distant ancestor. This is someone who I was joking around with on the phone last week. Like, this is, and when she
Exactly.
was, the majority of houses didn't have electricity. Like, it's crazy to think about that.
Well, we were part of when we were talking about that. Um, my grandmother, while earlier, same scenario, but she was actually a slave for
Unbelievable.
and she could have that conversation with me. It stopped when she was about 2, and so I was like, "Wow, my grandmother was a slave." Now all the changes that happened since then from electricity. I remember going to their farm. I lived in Canada at the time, and we would go see our grandparents, and they were part of a farm that was called Tunnel Hill. And Tunnel Hill was on the Underground Railroad for slaves to go up to the north. And they could sleep in my grandmother. There was a train track and it had like a tunnel. And they could stay in the tunnel, come up to my grandparents, get some food, do whatever, go back down and continue on their journey. And you start to think about what we do versus what people went through to get to the point where we could do what we could do. And it's just mind boggling. I mean, and for
Yeah.
them, they could never imagine. I remember when Barack Obama got elected, I took all the pictures of my ancestors and I put them in front of the TV for his inauguration and just said, you know what? Even if you're not here, you're around, and this is something you probably couldn't imagine. Here you go. And
Yeah.
so along with that, when I think about the tools that we get to deal with and what music means, because oftentimes artists are at the forefront of when there's these massive movements in the country, whether it's culturally or politically, and this is a time for artists to be heard,
Yep.
and I think from all sides, from
Yep.
all perspectives,
And
and
music kind of represents where the Venn diagrams cross in the
yes,
most important way. And you see it with technology and the economy and politics, and everyone always turns to music to help guide them through things and explain things on some fundamental level. And
yes,
I think that's also tied into kind of where that greatness comes from, that the thing that inspires all of us and the things that we're all as artists trying to create. And that's what's ironic when you look at the things that we fixate on. Oftentimes and this is the thing that fascinates me the most, is the disconnect between what we fixate on when we're trying to make music
mhm,
and the reality of where it all actually seems to come from, because they're
yeah,
often really, really different.
they're very different. And the fascinating thing about where we are now is we all used to focus on the hit record being the end thing. And now it's so much broader than that. It's
Yeah.
so much bigger than that. And there's opportunity in that, both in terms of your creative spirit and really your checking account. You,
And that
you
hit
don't,
record thing is tied into a different era of industry anyway. I mean, so much of what we also fixate on around that, hits and what we consider to be success is rooted in, a mostly bygone era and
yeah,
also a brief era, like
yes,
it was only like, it was like what, the 50s that people had records at home at
that's
all.
right. That's right.
Before that, you couldn't even really put music on. I
That's
mean, I
right.
guess, there was like a Victrola or something, but the modern LP era, 50s, 60s, again, like it wasn't that long ago.
Yep. Yep. I'm actually in a conversation now with somebody to potentially put together a live label, and they'll just record this artist who's phenomenal just on the road while she tours. and do, 4-song, 6-song EPs that are recorded that night, mixed that night, and given to the audience through QR codes and other fan engagement ways that night. You can break the barriers which lend to how you think differently creatively about capturing things, and it's really exciting,
It's
actually.
such a smart idea. I
I
remember one of the, in my job, I'm lucky enough to get to interface with different great artists all the time. So I've gotten a lot of unforgettable moments because of that. And one of them was Pete Townsend. I remember
Wow,
he said,
wow.
uh, music is not just, or recording is not just about capturing music, it's about capturing a moment. And that was such an interesting, insightful thing to me.
Listen, your Pete Townsend moment is my Maurice White moment from Earth, Wind and Fire. And I used to say, Reese, I was lucky enough to work with him for 6 years and get his last record done through Concord, and it was actually the first and only time he had Black representation. I wasn't his only representation, but it wasn't. You had to get into that circle of trust, right?
Yeah.
Because he had created a very successful career in what he was doing, and he said, I was like, man, where did the interludes come from? And he said, man, we'd be recording, and I would just tell the band, keep playing. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I had a feeling there'd be a moment, and particularly if I could feel that they were rocking. And it turned out those interludes became such staples for the catalog, and in some cases became as famous as the songs.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
And
all because of the feeling, being willing to
period.
follow the feeling and not reverse engineer it or try to manufacture it. Think of
Yep,
all the times that it's actually more common than not that these moments, these accidents or mistakes are the things that actually lead to, like
absolutely.
uh the Bob Dylan's shirt buttons on Blood on the Tracks hitting the
Yeah.
guitar, or like
Yep.
Johnny. I remember Johnny Greenwood in Creep, like before the chorus, you hear him
Uh,
like chug chug on the guitar. It's like he was just checking to make sure it was on.
right.
It wasn't supposed to be in the recording, but it was like an accident, and it became like the most the defining moment of their big hit that
Yep.
broke the band, or like,
Yep. And
there's so many examples of it.
well, it's also instructive to the people that we're speaking to today. Don't be afraid to do that. Go down that path.
Yeah.
It-
Leave it
It's,
in.
it's another take.
Yeah.
You don't know
Yeah.
what you might get.
Yep.
Just go. The music is not something that you try to put into a box and it has this happy bowed up ending. Go be creative, man. Go
Yeah.
scratch that itch.
Yep. Yep.
You
And
just
and and don't be afraid to like just follow the feeling, like I know we've talked before about David Bowie and like the 5 years, that classic song. If you hear the soloed vocal of it, you can hear him just crying. He's
yeah.
like he can barely sing because he's sobbing while he's singing, and he's missing notes, and it's all broken. It's the kind of thing somebody might say like, oh, well, we can't use that, obviously, like we got to take it again. But
No.
no, that's what led to the classic moment,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, this is all. And the interesting thing here is that a lot of the technology and the tools that we value most, if they're used irresponsibly, they can be counterproductive to all these
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely. I mean, our favorite line is use technology, don't let technology use you,
Yep.
and understand, computers can't cry. And ultimately, your gut and your ear and your passion and your emotion is important for you to be in touch with, because it's going to allow you to go places that you never thought before.
Yep.
Don't be afraid to be courageous. This you're in your room, you're making something. Nobody's going to chastise you. Go for it. And it's really a combination of how you take the past, the kind of analog of the world, and the digital, and then you're in the middle controlling how that works. You're the conduit. You're actually the plug-in that's most important.
Yes, definitely.
You know?
I mean, imagine if our company makes a product called RX
Yeah.
that's used to fix a lot of problems, but if you don't have someone creative, using it artistically, you could inadvertently erase all the most valuable moments. You'd lose Bowie crying, you'd lose Dylan's buttons on the guitar, you'd lose Johnny Greenwood's guitar noise, all these classic moments, you would lose. I was talking about this with Laura Sisk recently, who uses RX every day, and she said, that's the most important thing about it, is actually the person using it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's why, AI can't really do that, because AI wouldn't know any better.
And it's an interesting perspective, because I feel like AI is something for me to at least approach to the degree that I can manage it in my own circumstance.
Yeah.
In other places, maybe not. I don't think we're designed to beat algorithms, but I can sort of affect how much I want to control something. And then if I want to stop it, let me stop it. I've got to at least go into it with that perspective.
Yeah.
You know, is that how you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love AI and machine learning and everything it does for the world and for music production and everything. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think some of it gets overblown a little bit. Like, people talk about it like aliens have landed on the earth and introduced some new thing that's never
Right.
been here before. Like, I think it's not as crazy as people make it sound.
Right.
When you're driving, like an automatic transmission in a car, or, the lane assist, it beeps when you're, drifting, or, there's little things like this that are like, you're not like, oh, there's a robot driving the car for me. Someday you're not going to need me anymore. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
not that big of a deal. It's like, no, it's just a helpful feature in your car.
And as we get used to it, we learn how to manage it like anything else.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
And as long as it supports that thing, the thing that we were talking about earlier, about the thing that inspires you when you hear music, this great, mysterious, unexplainable thing that makes you feel something when you listen to music. And that's the thing that hasn't changed today versus before AI, versus before recorded music. Mozart and Bach and Beethoven 200 plus years ago. Like, I don't think that thing has actually changed. So it doesn't matter what technology or tools or whatever genres of music, because ultimately all of that is actually just on the outside. It's just a vehicle for the feeling.
Yep. And remember that we, including the audience, we have control over the parts we have control of. Don't approach it like, oh my God, I have to submit myself to this, and whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. No.
Right.
No. Bring you to the party.
Yes.
That's what music has always been.
Yep.
And creativity. Creativity is about you coming to the party with your perspective, your thing, and it has mattered over time. Whatever has been in the way, we're always in a technical evolution, and we adapt accordingly. I remember.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking about bringing yourself to the party. I just thinking of another Dylan anecdote that I happened to read at some point over the last few years, was when he recorded that great song, Murder Most Foul, that came out. It was right when COVID started. And it's, like a 16-minute crazy ambitious song. It's a really cool song, but Fiona Apple plays piano on it. And I was reading an interview where apparently she was pretty nervous going into it. And he just said, don't worry about messing up. Don't worry about playing the wrong notes or anything. I don't want the right notes. I just want you.
Right.
It is that exact same idea. It's like, I just want you to be there. It's not about what you're playing.
It's funny. Just like you, over the course of Pensado's Place, we've had a chance to meet and talk to greats. And fortunately, in some cases, they get really comfortable with sharing things. And so very early on in the show, when we talked to Drake's guy 40, who is just brilliant,
Yep.
I didn't know at the time, and he was forthcoming with it, that he had been doing all that he was doing and dealing with multiple sclerosis.
Yep.
And just amazing. When I went to Al Schmidt for our first award show, I said, Al, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but you think you could reach out to Paul McCartney? And he went, yeah. I was like, oh, no shit. And he did. And then I left. I came back. I knocked on the door. I said, Al, you think you could reach out to Dylan? And he did that too. But he got Paul. He couldn't get Dylan. But a lot of people didn't know that Al had a hearing problem in one ear.
I didn't
And,
know that.
and a lot of people didn't know because he was just so damn gifted.
Yeah.
And I noticed when we would interview him, he'd want to sit on a certain side so he could hear, and he was comfortable with sharing that. And we never blew it up or did anything like that. But the point that I think we're both making is that you get through whatever you got, and it doesn't mean that you still don't bring yourself to it. Limitations, assets, issues. That's the beauty of creativity, man. Just
wow. Yeah, Al Schmidt, you would never, I mean, that's such a great story because he's considered the best to ever do it in terms of being able to hear. Someone might say, oh, well, he must have just had superhuman ears in terms of a technical capability of, but if he had actually had hearing problems, and there were frequencies he couldn't even hear, but it didn't matter because it was him.
It was him. And the other thing is that when you have your team who understands, and he always had one or two guys that were in the booth with him doing their thing, helping him out, and together it just made a full unit that killed. I mean, Al's mixes were just unreal, and across a wide range of genres.
Yep.
Range. You would never think a guy that age, that celebrated, you can go from Paul McCartney to Earth, Wind and Fire to Blood, Sweat, whoever it was. Al's point of view was not only necessary, it helped make those records classic. And you would never think it was based on limitations.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the future? Are you optimistic?
Oh, definitely. I mean, even the present. I mean, I think there's never been so much great music as there is today. I think pop music is as good as it's ever been. I think all of it is. I mean, yeah, there's no shortage of great music, and there's never been so many people interested in making music and empowered with the tools and the resources to be able to pursue it. And I mean, just objectively, all the signs point to the future being some of the best music we'll ever hear, just by nature of how many people are doing it and interested and passionate about it. I know you got to get through the noise. That's a different issue. There's never been so much bad music also, but that's okay. Like, you just got to work a little harder to find the good stuff, but it's everywhere.
And I think that from our chair, that we're seeing people who are saying, let me utilize all the tools available to me to find it now, as opposed to there's younger, newer, other kind of perspectives and ideas, and I'm not going to approach this the same way. I'm going to approach this differently, and let's see where it lands. And that shit's exciting, man.
Yeah. There's never been so much creativity and production. And I love the idea that someone can come into the studio with a song and be able to have just an infinite, have so many different ways to approach it and capture it and different ways to try it. It's not just like, well, this is my guitar,
right?
This is my bass. So
Yeah.
This is what I got,
Just
like,
deal with it. Yeah.
yeah. And I know that the same thing also does create problems. Like you don't want too many possibilities because,
Hmm.
like we were saying, limitation. Again, Pete Townsend actually in the exact same conversation said, if you can't capture it in 4 tracks, you don't got it.
Right.
Like he wrote Tommy on a 4 track. So
Amazing.
like, like maybe that's a little extreme, but like if you can't capture it in a minimal number of tracks, maybe you got to go back to the drawing board.
Well, and what, to your point, what people who are creative in the music space sometimes lose sight of is you're aiming for simplicity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
simplicity is much harder than being complex.
Yes.
Shit, I'm not that musical. I can go be complex in the next 10 minutes and you'll be like, what the hell is this? But when you look at the people that we admire, the Beatles, and just, fill in the list,
Yep.
it's how did they get to that? How do you get to Eleanor Rigby?
Yep. Less is more.
How do you, I guess my dog was triggered by Eleanor Rigby.
Oh, nice. Come on in.
So that's what's so fascinating about when you know your mission, you got your tools, you bring your instinct to it, you stay balanced, and then go for it.
The less is more thing. I was just a week ago with Alicia Keys because we're building a new software instrument together.
Nice.
And it's a follow up to the one that we did together, Alicia's Keys. That was like 15
Yeah.
years ago or something.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that same thing. We're actually talking about things that she's learned. Oh, because she's seen a lot in her career.
Yes.
She's a very talented producer and engineer and arranger and writer. And she said the one thing she wished she knew early on is that less is more,
Wow.
and that you can make something sound bigger with fewer parts. And
Mhm.
that Girl on Fire was her example of that. They were trying to make it a big stadium thing, and it turned out that cutting it down to just a handful of elements is what made it sound big and
Bigger.
huge. I
Yeah.
think Tom Petty got that too. I think a lot of people got that. It's kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but it's true.
Well, speaking of that, which we'll have a conversation about that privately, because of you, I've been talking to Ann Mincielli about stuff that we're going to go do, and she's like, "Oh, me and Alicia," which is great to hear. So we'll talk about, if we can be helpful when you launch it or whatever the case may
Oh
be.
yeah, for sure.
Oh
Anne's
yeah,
amazing, by the way. I don't know if
I-
I've ever met anyone who wears so many hats.
it's unreal.
It's crazy. I actually said to her, like, Anne, you gotta like, are like maybe you should like take off a few of these hats. Like you've
Right.
got you do too many things, but I think it's just the way she operates.
No, I literally over the last 2 weeks have been in that same mode. Like, Herb, just because everybody wants you to walk on water doesn't mean you can walk on water for everybody. Like, and
Yeah,
if you don't find a balance, if you don't pour something into yourself, you don't have other things to give to people,
yeah,
and that's but here's what I would propose if you're down for it. I think this should be an ongoing series that maybe we do this once a quarter
I
and
love it.
catch up on things. I think as you know, we would love to be somebody that is a promoter of and involved with your tools and so on and so forth and have that make sense. But I think macro view conversations about that stuff, at minimum, is good for me and you. I think it likely is good for other people
Yeah,
as well too. And just as somebody who has watched your work over time, this is what makes it optimistic about the business. People who care, people who you can always tell when the level of artists who deal with you deal with you. Our conversations have been organic from the jump. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
we could just record every one of them.
I know. I wish we had recorded some of them.
Well, we're going to do a bunch more. We'll miss some stuff, but we'll get some new stuff.
Great. Just like
Yeah,
making music.
absolutely. There you go. The culture of creativity.
Yeah.
Uh, Family, we are going to do more of this. Dave Godowsky is somebody whose advice you want, perspective you want, and it's going to make your ability better. That's not true of everybody in the business. It's true of some. And he literally is one of the best. Dave,
Thanks,
love
man.
you. Love you, dude. More to come.
Love you, man.
Same here.